Hey everyone. I wanted to make this quick tutorial to go over an issue that I found trouble researching when looking at exporting a single mesh with child meshes from Houdini to a game engine such as Unity. So if we look at our game engine, we have our parent object and we have our children objects, and each child has a pivot assigned to the center of that object. I can move the parent, I can move the children. Seems simple. So let's go over this solution that I packed into one node. I'll build this as well just so we go over this, but I wanted to just show just the overview of how things work here. So I have my three objects, my sphere, my tube, and my box. I've offset them a certain amount, and I've created a name for each one. After that, we merge them together, we pack them together and assign a path and a name attribute, and then we export it as an FBX. So let's go over how to build this. So let's look at our scene view, turn this off, and let's add a geometry node. And for the sake of this tutorial, we'll call it Houdini tutorial. Dive in there, and let's add a box, a sphere, and a tube. And for the tube, I'm going to close the end caps here. So right now, we have a bunch of objects at the same spot. Now, I can go and offset the center of these, but for the sake of helping people learn more about each individual node, I'm going to throw down a transform node and just offset this as well. You can see that I am going in increments of 0.1 by using my scroll wheel up and down. If you hold down on your middle mouse button, you can change the amount of that increment. So whole points or subpoints. Let's throw down another transform for our sphere. And let's move it on the up direction. Throw down our last transform. We don't really need to offset this one, but it's fine to do so. Just push it off there. And lastly, we need to add a name node to each of these so that we can split them up later after we merge them. So for this one, this is the box. So I'm going to be clever and call it box. Now let's quickly take a look at the geometry spreadsheet here. When I just click on the transform node for the primitives, you notice that we have a number for each primitive in the box, but we don't have a name. So once we assign that name, this name here, box, also we have a name assigned to each primitive. So each of these primitives belongs to the name box. That means that each of these is going to be combined as one mesh with the name of box. So let's add another name node here, and you guessed it, we'll call this sphere. So now we have each of our sphere primitives assigned to the name sphere. And lastly, we'll have a tube. All right. And now when we throw down a merge node and merge them all together by selecting all of these and dragging them to the merge node, you'll see that we have each of our primitives now isolated to the specific name of that primitive that they belong to. So how do we pack these out now? Because if we just exported this, it would be one object instead of three. So we need a pack node. Connect that in there. And we need to enable our path attribute and our name attribute. One thing we don't need is create packed fragments, because we are not packing RBD simulation here. So we're just going to leave that unchecked. now that we have those, if you have any other attributes to transfer, for instance, if you added a normal to each of them. Right. Then if we come down here, we could add the normal. So let's now export this as an FBX. We'll type in FBX, and we want ROP FBX output. Connect that up. And the thing that we want to make sure that is checked is build hierarchy from path attribute. So this path attribute is created by the pack node, and that's what we generated here. So if we look at our geometry spreadsheet, instead of under our primitives like we had before, if we look at our merge, we have each individual primitive. If we look at now underneath our pack node, those primitives have been turned into a path. So 0, 1, and 2, because we have 3 objects. So this path right now is saying grab the object, and then we are underneath object/Houdini tutorial, because that is the SOP node, and then pack1, which is the name of the pack node. So if we changed this to, say, test output, you can see that changes to test output here. And lastly, we have our names here, box, sphere, and tube. So if you don't want this whole hierarchy generated for you, you can simply just delete that, and you'll get box, sphere, and tube. So let's go to our output file. I have a project already, so I'm going to reference that by pasting that in there. And I'm going to go to Houdini tutorial, and I have my test FBX, so we'll call this new test.fbx. Accept. It's important to add the .fbx at the end, because otherwise Houdini is not going to export it correctly as an FBX. All these are correct for me, so I'm going to leave them as is, but if you are exporting to a different engine, perhaps you want to change your axis system. So I'm going to go up here and say save to disk. Now it's really fast because these are simple primitives. So we'll go back here, and you see we have a new test. So I'll delete this test, drag a new test. And you can see underneath our parent of new test, we have our children, box, sphere, and tube. So hopefully this helps people with exporting children in Houdini, because I know that the common recommendation is to create another geometry node as a child, call this child, and export the parent. But the reason why I find this more helpful is because you can do things like take all of these create names, merge them, and then say match size to the center or to a different pivot point, and then export them, and you have much more flexibility in that regard. So hopefully this helps, and let me know if anyone has any questions.